We had the chance to sit down with Shana and Rhiannna to talk a little bit about law enforcement from the dispatch side, and they told a good story about working through an active shooter situation from behind the mic. I hope you enjoy it. And hello, welcome to The Call. The name of our podcast is The Call, and we are ALERRT. The ALERRT program is a grant-funded, data-driven program built to provide training to first responders around the country. And we are housed out of Texas State University in San Marcos, Texas. My name is Eddie Molina, and I am the Southeast Regional Manager for the program. And this is my partner, Casey.
Casey Williams. I am the e-learning program manager for ALERRT.
So we are doing this podcast in order to send pertinent information to the people that listen to us. And for us, it's all about the whole program. Everybody uses the word holistic, and we want to talk about all facets of what we do as first responders. So today we're interviewing a couple of gals who come from the dispatch side of things. The side that you don't get to see out on the streets. Everybody on the street sees the people in uniform. Sees the people in the vehicles with the flashy lights and all that. But the part that we don't get to see is who those people are actually talking to when they get on the radio. And we appreciate you guys being here to sit down and kind of share your side of what's going on in life from day to day. How about some quick intros? Shana, if you get started, just a quick intro on you.
All right, my name is Shana Dewey, and I work at the San Antonio International Airport. I am a operations supervisor. I'm a training supervisor, and I've been doing it for 10 years.
10 years, wow, that's a great career. You've been having fun doing that. Rhiannna, how about you?
My name is Rhiannna Fincher. Currently, I'm an instructor at the Department of Criminal Justice Training. I've been doing that for about 2 years, not quite 2 years. Before that, I was a dispatcher, a senior comm officer at the Vero Beach Police Department, and I was there for 16 years.
That's awesome. Vero Beach, that's a pretty area.
It is.
Is that home?
That is home.
Oh,
Born
awesome.
and raised.
Born and raised in Vero Beach.
Yes.
All right. So, what's the best beach place to go to around there?
In Vero, I'd say if you go up to the north part of the county, the beaches are a little more quieter.
Yeah.
If you stay in Vero and you're hitting JC and South Beach, they tend to be a little more populated.
Is there surfing there? Which side of the peninsula are you all on?
We're on the east coast of Florida.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So there's good surf there then. So you can go
There
out,
is.
get some waves. That's great.
Good surf, good diving.
So Vero Beach, there's spring training baseball there, isn't there?
The Dodgers used to be there.
Oh, okay. That's
Yeah.
where they used to be. Okay,
That's
but they
where
moved since then. Okay,
have.
cool. All right, great. Shanna, how about you? Where'd you grow up at?
I grew up in a little town in New Mexico called Clovis.
Clovis, New Mexico.
Eastern New Mexico.
Now, has Clovis, New Mexico been in any songs? Because I know there's, like, all the towns in New Mexico have some sort of song attached to it.
No, actually, Clovis is known for archaeology.
Oh, yeah?
The Clovis Point, the arrow points, and they had a lot of mammoths. So I used to go to the Eastern New Mexico University, and I cataloged mammoth teeth, which are really large.
You cataloged
Yes.
mammoth teeth.
Yes, we went to digs, and we would dig up mammoth teeth. And
So
then
you
catalog
actually
them.
got to have your hands on a mammoth tooth?
I did.
Holy smokes! I've never met anybody who can say that.
Go
That
to
is
Peace
pretty-
River in Florida.
Tell me.
Very good.
Peace River in Florida, you can go and kayak canoe through there, and you get to scoop and look for fossils, and they find all kinds of stuff there.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Damn, I'm learning more and more every day. I love this. All right, we're starting out in the right direction. All right, so you guys are here at the conference. We're actually recording this from the conference, the ALERRT conference in Nashville, Tennessee. And we have a yearly conference we put on with the purpose or with the hope of providing training, new training to the first responder world and to the military operator world. And one of the big focuses for ALERRT, we started out as a program teaching people how to respond to active shooter situations. And we started out with, we have 3 different sections that we look at the most. It's how to stop the killing, how to stop the dying, and how to get the injured people to the help as quickly as possible. And so what we have found through the years of our training is the step that everybody was missing in all the training that was being put out is how do you integrate all the facets of what's actually going on out there? And everybody has great training out there for law enforcement. And there's some great training out there for fire. But when we start talking about how we get those guys out there and work together, people were leaving out that component of dispatch. And when we put out our integrated class, it's a active attack integrated response. It's the ALERRT program. One of the things that we really like to do is to incorporate the dispatch component so that we can actually have a fully working machine, because without that part of the cog, or without that cog in our gears, there's nothing that's going to happen. If we leave that out, communication falls apart. So the communication section is always necessary for us to function fully. So what drew you all to service in that field?
In dispatch?
Yeah.
I kind of always knew I was going to be in public service. I started out as an EMT. And then when I moved back to Florida, back home, I saw an ad on the local county channel for a dispatch position, and I applied for it, and I got into it and fell in love with it.
Wow, that's great. So how many years did you do as a dispatcher?
It was 16 years, not quite 17,
Wow, that's great. So you were working for the county?
for the city.
For the city?
Mhm.
So was there different levels to go through as a dispatcher?
Yep, you start off as a call taker. Our department actually set up, you'll find it in a lot of departments that you start off and you're always going to do the same job. It doesn't matter the title you have. A dispatcher is a dispatcher is a dispatcher. But you start off here and then there's nowhere to go. So our department actually set up steps for us to keep us there longer, to make it a career more
Right.
than just a job.
Oh, that's great. That's a
Yeah.
good, and so as long as you're making the people that work for you happier and feel like they're actually doing something, they're actually going to be content, and they're going to keep working harder to get better at what they're doing, and they're not going to want to leave.
If you give them goals to achieve, they're not going to want to leave.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And that's a good concept for any business across the board, across the world. So dispatching, how about for you, Shanna? What drove you into public service?
I kind of fell into it myself. I don't have like a definitive answer to that. I moved to San Antonio. I actually grew up in San Antonio as well, and I moved back to San Antonio, and there was a job listing for the airport, and I got the job at the airport. And when I first started working at the airport, we have airport police, fire, EMS. It was a little bit different. It wasn't exactly the same thing as working for the city or the big PSAP like SAPD. You were working more on aviation type emergencies. But the bigger that the airport has gotten, the levels of crimes and the type of situations that we've had have changed and evolved. And so we've had to evolve with it. And so a lot of the training that wasn't available when I first started, I sought out on my own. And then we went over, have new management and everything, and they've done a great job of making sure that not only are we well trained and frequently refresh our training, but kind of like Rhiannna said, you know, they kind of give you ownership of your job and your position. So there's abilities to move forward and to own the job, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's great. And you speak highly. You spoke highly of the management providing this new outlook on the training and on the actual job. So when you talk about the management, are you talking about the police function, the people that came in as police officers in there, or the police management, or are you talking about the actual dispatch management?
I'm speaking about the dispatch management.
That's great. And I think anytime you're in any industry where somebody that works at that place is willing to speak highly of the management, that's like the first telltale sign that you're going to have a successful place or successful place of business. And that's great. So both of you are speaking the same way. It's like we're looking for ways to pump up the people.
Right.
That's great. So cool. So now you all have been in dispatch for quite a while. And at ALERRT, we actually offer, we have a connection. We have a direct link to the TEACS group where we have a training for dispatch, and it's actually focused on dispatching active attack incidents. Now, I know you had some input on having that built up. Shannon, can you tell us a little bit about what part you took in that?
When I first started researching active shooter incidents, it was interesting because one of the other dispatchers said, well, what would we do if we had an active shooter? And nobody could say what we would do. In fact, one of our old directors said, well, I'm going to call 911. And I thought, well, we have airport police here. We don't need to call 911. We're the ones that are going to be sending everybody out there. And so I wanted to know how PD would respond, how EMS would respond, how everybody else is going to be responding, so I know what I need to do so I can be proactive. And I met Terry Nichols with ALERRT, and he was great. He put me in touch with the ALERRT program. I got to see Wayne Freeman in one of the breakout sessions. I think it was like 5 years ago. And so Wayne and I started working together, and I ask a million stupid questions just so I can make sure it's cemented in my head. And so we worked together to bring up the e-learning based on the CRAZE training from ALERRT on managing an active shooter incident as the dispatcher, where you're doing more than just, hey, you need to go over here. It's much more evolved than that.
Yeah, and so for those of y'all who are watching or listening, Wayne Freeman is, I guess he's basically the director of training for South Carolina.
Yes.
And that guy has facilitated more training for the state through ALERRT than probably anybody else in the books. Great guy, and he's actually here presenting again this year, so he's a consistent supporter of the program, but he's one of those guys that if you actually call him, he's going to return the call. If you send him an email, he's going to return, he's going to actually answer, and that's one of the integral parts of creating a good community is that you actually have to respond to the communication. So communications and responding to communications. So I bounce back and forth all across the board. So what's your all's key move? What's your best move when somebody doesn't respond to you? When you're calling one of those cops out to put them on a call and they don't respond to you, what's the move y'all have up your sleeve?
What's in our trick bag?
Yes.
You call them again. And if they don't answer again, you're sending backup. I need another unit out there. I need to know what's going on. I need to know now.
You're toning them out.
Yeah.
They're going to answer you one way or another.
Tones.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for those of y'all listening, when they say tone them out, that's one of those emergency tones that goes out when you're in a restaurant or you're somewhere out in public and you hear those emergency tones going out. It's like a real loud be-doo-dee-doo-dee-doo. Yes, I did that on camera.
No, these ladies seem like a constant single tone.
It is a single tone.
It's the single
The
tone.
be-doo-dee-doo-dee-doo is clearing that traffic.
Oh my gosh. The loud single tone, it's like your heart just stopped. That's basically what happened. So yeah, and that's that tone that goes across all the channels and lets everybody know that either somebody's in trouble or somebody's not responding, right? So we need to get somebody help to them. And that brings everybody back to actually paying attention to what's going on the radio. And we talk a lot about the communication loop. And communication, it's a signal that we send out, and it is received by a person. Or we're sending a message, and we're the sender. The receiver has to actually receive the message and return some sort of communication. And that's what we call the communication loop, right? But if at any point that communication loop is broken, then that's when we hit the tone and we start speaking a little bit louder or sending backup, like you said. And that's across life. That's just a consistent thing. If we don't have good communications going on, then we have to build up from there. So communications, now y'all are building up different communications styles, and we've been talking a lot. We've been talking to you guys this week about maybe adding on to a tactical response type of a plan for dispatch. You guys you're a trainer now. You're a dedicated trainer in Florida. So
In Kentucky.
I'm sorry, in Kentucky. You're a dedicated trainer now for the Department of Justice there.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the things that have changed along the way since you started dispatching to now? What are some of the things that you've seen changing for what's going on for dispatch and what's going on for the training of dispatch?
It's not just in an airport setting, like Shana was saying, as far as the level of crimes and stuff that are happening, that are changing. It's happening across the board. Things are becoming more severe. So I personally feel I'm very passionate about training. I don't feel that dispatchers are up to that level. And I'm not saying for every agency, and I know agencies have issues with budgets and sending dispatch to training and that kind of stuff, but I think they need to start realizing it's got to happen. Everybody has got to be on the same page to get these responders going and to get the help out there that needs to be out there as quick as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a consistent message that you'll find whether you're asking dispatch or you're asking the law enforcement side, or you're asking the fire side, or even if you're asking the military side. When everybody's not at the same level or nobody's up to playing at the same level, then we have to fix something along the way. So we look at what's happening on the training side and how do you fix what's going on the training side, but you have to set standards. And if you don't have a good standard by which to operate on daily or by which to train, then you won't have a good standard on how to operate on a daily basis. So we look at setting standards for the industry, and that's what one of our aims is in our program. So how have the standards changed, or what are some of the standards that you guys are looking to square away?
I think getting more training out there for dispatchers, more up-to-date training, joint training with their responders. I think that's the key right there. You hear all the time about SWAT going out and training, SWAT going out and training this. Now they're starting to bring in that EMS, the tactical EMS and everything into it as well. Something that ALERRT has been pushing so much, and what we just sat through in our class was bringing dispatch into that now too. I mean, I look at it like Wayne kept saying, we are a team, and you are part of the team. I played basketball for years. You don't go to practice and the point guard sits out and doesn't practice with the team. That's kind of what's happening with dispatch. Dispatch is kind of the point guard of the team. We're the ones that are directing. We are kind of the overseers of everything. But we're being left out of that training. And I think that's a big problem.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I think both of us would agree on that. It's like we can have all kinds of cool training out there. It's like, but even when we set up on a house as a SWAT guy, even when we set up on a house without having good communications, without having a good person to relay the messages back to, everything would break down. And we definitely agree with you. So we have to increase the level of training, right? Mm-hmm. Better training is what's going to make better cooperation. Go ahead.
I've never heard it as the point guard, but that's pretty impactful if you think about it, because when we would have dispatchers attend the air classes that we put on, I loved it because I got to tell them, hey, now you know what's going on. Now you know what should be going on. And if that stuff doesn't happen, you can prompt those things to happen, just like a point guard, as the things are happening.
It helps us do our job, and that's something that I preach to who I teach now and when I was a CTO back at my agency. We have to look ahead. So if I have a little bit of knowledge about what you guys are doing out there, I can say, okay, I'm putting myself in his shoes. I need to start thinking about X, Y, and Z. Because right now, we're at ABC. Okay, so I need to start looking ahead and start making those preparations.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, while we are doing on the law enforcement side A, B, and C, we're not thinking X, Y, and Z because we're dealing with the A, B, and C type problems, but having somebody that's in the backfield, right, or as the point guard running down, hey, this is what needs to happen while somebody's dribbling the ball, they don't need to think about it. And
Absolutely.
That's a pretty awesome thing.
Yeah, it is. It's a great analogy because we know that. So just like there's more proficient cops and less proficient cops, the guys that will achieve more in the day than there will others, we know that most of the good dispatchers, they will have ordered up anything else that we need before we need it, and they will have that all rolling by the time we get to that point in any call. And we know that that's true. But yeah, that's a great analogy. I'm glad you pointed that out. So what's the difference between the group that y'all trained with and the group that y'all are training now? Because I know from the first responder side or the law enforcement side, I know things have changed along the way. And I remember when we hit the 20-year mark, one of my partners, one of my buddies from Austin, he gave me that story. He said, man, I remember those guys that when we were 20 years on, or when we were brand new, they were 20 plus, they were so negative, and they thought we were all a bunch of wussies and we didn't know what we were doing. He says, I think I became one. And I was like, yeah, I totally get it because we're at 20 years now and our generation is different from their generation. But their generation was different from the guys 20 years before them. And those guys thought that they were going to get their butts kicked. So it's like that. It's a cyclical thing. What's the difference in the people that you all are seeing coming in now that want to be dispatched? Because I think on our side, what I see anyways, is the new generation is exposed to all of the tech stuff that's out there. And I personally think that the new guys out there are a lot smarter, a lot more educated in the stuff that's going on out in the streets. What are you guys seeing on the dispatch side?
So speaking about generational differences in a dispatch center, it can get a little touchy because unlike you guys where you can go into your vehicles and go to different zones and this and that and be away from each other, it's a little bit easier to handle. But in dispatch, you're thrown all in a room together. So you have to overlook the generational differences and start building off of each other's strengths. So you have your older dispatchers that know policy and procedure, that know their guys, that know what they're going through, that know this. But you have the newer generations that are coming in that are super tech savvy, and they're very quick to pick things up on the computers. That brings me into the whole next gen thing and the new technologies and stuff that are coming out there that are being pushed. The simple basic stuff like text to 911 and what that has opened up for 911 dispatching. When we have a caller that calls in now, if they can't speak to us, but they're in a position to text, we're still able to get that information that we can get to our responders. You look at Rapid SOS, that's given us the ability to not to give us a radius of where this person is calling from, but is actually pinpointing the room that they're in a house. And we're able to see that. That's helpful for you guys. I just had a student tell me the other day about something called 911i. Amazing technology. And when it gets out there to everybody, it's going to be super, super cool, especially for the first responders and their safety. So the story that he shared with me is they had a call about a prowler. The person called on their cell phone, and with a smartphone, and I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but they're given a code that they can get into and they can access that caller's video and pictures. So the caller's videoing and can see the officer pull up, can see everything, and the caller is telling the dispatcher it's behind them. The dispatcher is seeing on the screen that the prowler is behind the car that the officer can't see, and it says he's on the other side of the car. So that was amazing. That's technology working for us.
Wow.
Yeah.
That does sound great.
Mm-hmm.
Technology, I think, has been the growth for all of us in all of our industries, and technology just continues to get better and better. I know that when I was a street cop, we had what we called MDTs or MDIs in our cars, and it was a cool computer where we could get all kinds of stuff. But that computer versus what was there, the laptops that were in the cars when I left the department, it was a night and day difference. And I remember the old guy saying, yeah, back in my day, there was computers in none of the cars, or just one car in the district had a computer, or none of them had cars, or none of them had computers. And I remember one guy actually was around for a little bit too long. He says, I remember back in the day when we worked downtown patrol, we didn't have radios, we had call boxes, and we'd go from one call box to the next. And that's just, it's ridiculous how much technology has grown along the way. But yeah, I agree with you. Those are great improvements just for our life in general.
Right.
These are just the basics. I mean, what they have and slated to come out is going to be game-changing.
That's awesome.
Game-changing.
I love hearing that. So what are some of the changes that you think that we need to be making going forward in the training for dispatch? And plus, we've been talking about creating a better tactical response that includes the dispatch. What are the main changes that we need to look at?
Well, I believe very strongly that one of the first things that we need to do is we need to train dispatchers hands-on, just like we do PD and fire. We need the stress inoculation. We need PD and dispatch to train together so we see what you're going through. So we understand both sides of, on our side of the mic and what's going on. We need to understand what your level of response is. Understanding the level of response is going to help us as dispatchers to be much more proactive, to have things waiting for you. You talked earlier about, there are certain dispatchers and they've got stuff waiting for you. I believe that hands-on training and a lot of training with the people that we work with on a regular basis kills the complacency, which is very dangerous. And it builds up more of a situational awareness across a spectrum of response. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but you can edit that out. But we definitely need more stress inoculation. When you guys are over there and you're on the gun range and you're shooting, some of our dispatchers, some of my guys, they've never shot a gun. They know nothing about guns. They don't understand the tunnel vision. They get angry when the officer doesn't answer them right away. Understanding the ins and outs of physiology, et cetera, are very important. And so I think that dispatchers normally learn in a lecture type situation, environment that doesn't do them any good. It's one thing to, have textbook learning, and it's another thing to be in the middle of it, so to speak.
Typically speaking, as adults, you need to meet all of those learning. So you need to have a visual, you need to have an auditory, you need to have a kinesthetic, so hands-on. Just like you do hands-on at the gun range or with your handcuffing or whatever it is, it's good for us to have that hands-on too, to build that muscle memory. These are, especially when you're talking about active shooter events or active assailant events or anything like that, they don't happen that often. And you guys know as well as I do that you're going to lose it if you don't use it. And, Shana had mentioned being complacent. I think dispatchers are super guilty of that. We sit in a little box and we're safe and we don't see everything outside. So we do become very complacent. But if the training is implemented on a regular basis and they're brought into those joint trainings, like I was saying, it's going to help break that shell. It's going to bridge the gap between dispatch and responders, and it's going to build that trust between the two, so when an event does happen, everybody's operating at the same level.
Yeah, absolutely. And you spoke to something that, my girlfriend had asked me, so what's the deal with the rivalry between cops and dispatch and firefighters? And it's like,
they don't bring us cookies.
well, yeah. And so she's like, well,
I know that's a shame.
It is.
So if you're listening to this and you're on duty, go bring your dispatcher some cookies, and I don't
Love
care
your
where you work.
dispatchers.
Yeah, love your dispatchers.
Yeah, and so when she asked me that, I was thinking, well, she's like, what is it? I said, well, one of the things is we don't really know each other unless you make an effort to go up and get to know them. I was lucky I had good FTOs that took me up into the dispatch center when I was in UCOP, said this is where they sit. And so I told her that one of the things that was consistent across the board is that dispatch is always set up, and it seems to be pretty consistent, that there's a room with no freaking windows. And you guys get put in front of a console with several different screens there, and you're in charge of running a whole patrol section or a whole section of the city, whether it's for cops or firefighters, and there's no physical connection to anybody. You have there's nothing, there's no sun shining on you, there's none of the vitamin D coming through the window, but there's none of that, and we don't actually have that visual where we know each other. And there's a complete separation of that, so it's easy to trash talk each other. Now, God forbid you all get on the bad side of any of it, we're gonna be there to take care of it. It's like a brother-sister thing. But we know that's a natural rivalry that gets set up. So that's the best way I could explain it, is like, how can there be success when we don't know each other? But we totally agree with the fact that we need to get dispatch put together with all of our training, because we want you to know what's happening out there. Because we don't need dispatch thinking, well, why is this guy taking so long to handcuff somebody? We want you to go put hands on somebody and put handcuffs on them so you can understand what it is they're going through. And you guys speak to it so clearly and so well because you all understand it, not because it's a natural thing, but because you guys have the years of experience of knowing the stuff that's actually going on out there in the field. And for us, having been behind the badge for so long, we know that that's a valuable thing for us, is to have somebody that actually understands us better. So thank you for pushing that out there. You guys have been integral in setting up training, creating new training, and you're pushing new training still. But you helped create a cool program that we offer online, and we can create links to. We'll talk about that more, about the links to get into that program that we offer through TEACS. And any of the dispatchers are available to take that. They can just pop online and take that class through TEACS.
Yeah.
But you helped create a program that deals with responding to an active shooter type of situation.
Right.
And you guys actually had one at the San Antonio airport.
Yeah, we did.
Tell me a little bit about it.
Well, it was several months ago, and we had an individual that was off of, in San Antonio, he was off 281 and 1604, and he was taking pot shots at everybody. And I work B shift, so I heard about it on the news, and so I kind of, filed it away. And when I got to work, I was like, hey guys, there's somebody hunting off 1604 and 281. He didn't hit anybody. Be alert, because he's looking. And no sooner had I said that later everybody was ready to kill me. But we got a call for a wrong way driver, and it ended up, being him. Then we got a shots fired call. I will say that Wayne Freeman taught me tactical breathing. And in all the time that I've been writing active shooter training and doing the training on TEACs, and I had not actually experienced anything like that. I did a lot of hands-on training with my guys, and I got my officers involved because they love to yell at us. And so I wanted to make it as realistic as possible. But I ran our department through every phase of an active shooter, from people calling who are peeing themselves and can't see, can't give you any intelligible information, to the officers. We ran through the whole gamut. When we first had that shots fired call come out, I was, that first second, I was like, oh my God. And I did tactical breathing, and it was just like, all right, I know exactly what I need to do now. Every active shooter incident is going to come in, it's going to be different. But the response is always going to be basically the same. And so practicing that response is important for PD, for fire, for dispatchers. After the incident happened, every guy in the comm center looked at me and they were like, everything you said was going to happen happened. I knew exactly what to do. And that was because of ALERRT. So, I think that the training right there was a horrible situation. It was scary as hell. All my officers were, and you mentioned earlier about the relationship between dispatchers and police officers. They're all my guys and my girls, and I love them dearly. And Wayne said it earlier, they're mine to hurt. Nobody else's. Mm-hmm. So I was just in awe that I get to work with people that run towards the danger on a regular basis, and that I get any small part in making sure that when they're doing that, they're doing so with the best information possible is, very humbling. But yeah, we did have our little active shooter, and it was scary stuff. It's one thing to train.
The way you put it together, the way you push it out there, what we talk about when we study leadership, we talk about ownership of what we're doing, ownership of our mistakes, ownership of the problems, ownership of the programs, and you're taking ownership of it, and that's what we do on all counts. But it's like you said, they're mine to hurt. And it's like,
guys.
When I spoke of it, I used the word rivalries, and when you spoke of it, you used the word relationships. And that's exactly the kind of stuff that we talk about. It's like it's a relationship, like it's a natural rivalry, and it's
a
always
love-hate
that thing.
thing.
Absolutely,
It's brothers and sisters.
But it's what you make of it, right?
Yes.
And if you do take ownership of that, that's what creates a better bond. But yeah, by all means, it's like when people ask about what causes that, it's because we don't get to see each other. We don't get to know who each other is, and that's just my opinion.
I challenge everybody to meet them.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
Take the time. I was very fortunate to come from a smaller agency. I knew my guys. I knew their wives. I knew their kids. They knew my son. We grew up together. I tell my students all the time during team building, we're part of this team. Do stuff to bring them in. So we used to do a carry-in. So me and my partner, we would cook breakfast or dinner or whatever. The guys would come in. That was our time. We got to make those connections and everything. I think it's very important to make those connections. Because if I have a connection to you, I'm more protective over you. If you're a number on the other end of the radio and I've never met you,
Right.
I don't know you, you know. Am I still going to do my job? Sure. Am I going to go maybe an extra step if I know you and you're friends with me and I'm friends with you? It makes it a little more personal.
Definitely.
You know?
So we have a dispatcher in San Antonio. So she was on the mic the night that her husband died in an accident, and she was actually had to dispatch through that, you know, Kim. So I won't talk a lot to the incident or about her, but she's great. What are some of the scarier incidents that you guys have had to dispatch? Now, obviously, an active shooter situation would stand out, and that's a big one. Is there any standout incidents that you guys have?
I've had several through my years. I'll tell you about my first hot call because it sticks with me. I had just come off of training. I just made partner, and I'm sitting there and 911 rings just like any other day. And I pick up the phone and 911, where's your emergency? And all I hear is this kid who at first I thought was a girl because his voice was so high pitched. And he just screams in my ear, my mom just blew her fucking head off. And as I was talking to him, I'm trying to get EMS going and everything, his dad picked the gun up and put it to his head. And I was like, oh my God. So I reached over, I toned it out. Our chief of police was actually the first one on scene. He was down at Walgreens buying a card for his wife. He was the first one on scene. They were able to talk Dad down. That was my very first hot call. That was the call where I sat back in my chair afterwards and I said, can I do this for the rest of my life?
Wow.
Yeah, that one sticks with me.
Wow, that's a great story, and
I feel personally traumatized by that.
Yeah, I love the way you wrap that up. Because it's an honest thing. It's like, am I capable of doing this for the rest of my life? Because that's I think we've all had incidents like that. But yeah, that's your calling. That's your calling. And although you may say that you asked yourself that, you already knew the answer to it because that was your calling to do this. Now, is there any component out there for dispatch in your area or dispatch across the country to allow for the resiliency side of things or to provide for any mental health help out there? Because you guys are dispatching the Las Vegas shootings. You guys are dispatching the active shooter at the airports. You guys dispatch all of those things. Are there any new components out there for mental health components for the dispatch side?
Adam Tim does a Healthy Dispatcher where they do a lot of stress exercises and stuff like that. They talk about wellness and holistic ways of doing things. We're going to have a new, supposedly someday, we're going to have a new comm center, and it's going to have a quiet room. And so you'll be able to walk out and
It's
leave
actually
the
becoming
situation.
really popular. I've heard a lot of the students come through and their agencies are building those spaces for them to go to.
It's a good place to decompress and everything. I think every dispatcher, call taker has those moments throughout their career where I don't know if I could do this. How would I do this? I have a brother-in-law that was killed in the line of duty, and it was right when I first started dispatching. And I remember thinking, how can I do this? Can I do that? Can I send somebody to an incident where they're going to end up dead?
Yeah.
And it was really hard, and the question kind of answered itself. I wanted to make sure that, he was really close with the dispatcher, and knowing that somebody, even, sometimes you have to send the guys in. Wayne calls officers attack dogs, and that really struck with me. He's like, you're going to take the muzzle off and let us go and wag our tail and bite things, but we know what we're going into. And so you send them in with as much knowledge and abilities as you can. And at least somebody on the other side of that radio cares. With the current state of events, the way everyone is treating officers these days, you need all the love you can get, I guess, on the other side of the radio.
I'd like to think that the departments are starting to realize that dispatchers they have trouble dealing with the calls that they take every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can hear it.
Emotional. I would like to see every place do. Now, something that's very interesting that the state of Kentucky does at their training, they have a resiliency section. And that's all they do. They teach stress and wellness. They teach resiliency. They do something called PCIS, which is a 3-day event for first responders or for law enforcement to include their dispatchers. That's amazing. So their
awesome.
dispatchers are able to go and decompress just as much as their law enforcement officers. And I wish every state had that same thing, because not all states are that way.
Yeah, PCIS is a great program. We know we've heard it from several different people from different states, and we know that that's a great program that's out there. And you talked about a program earlier. Do you want to mention that on air while we're talking about it? Something you had written down, maybe a foundation that's helping dispatch out?
The Denise Amberley Foundation, they are a clearinghouse for some of the best dispatch training. It was born out of tragedy, but they have a lot of really great training, and they're holistic as well. I take a lot of their training. I use a lot of their training in training my guys. Of course, you could just look it up, DeniseAmberleyFoundation.org. But yeah, they wanted to make sure that dispatchers were trained to certain levels and standards. It's not just you get somebody over there and they're behind a radio and boom, they're a dispatcher. There are more important aspects to being a dispatcher. Communication, sharing information, all of that type of...
Are you familiar with Denise Amberley and that story?
No, not at all.
Okay. Denise Amberley was she had 2 kids, I think?
Yeah, she had 2 children.
2 children. She was at home. She was kidnapped. There was a call placed. Her dad was law enforcement as well. They started looking for her. There was some miscommunication with a second call that came in to a different dispatcher, and that caller saw her, and at that point she was still alive. And there was never, that gap was never bridged between those 2 calls, and that information wasn't given. There was, from what I understand, there was a law enforcement officer that was right close to her. And had that information been gotten out to them, they might have saved her life.
The caller was following, he had kidnapped her, and she called and she was on the phone with the call taker.
Yep.
And another person saw her head kind of bouncing up and down in the back seat, and she felt like she was in danger, so she called, but the information didn't get shared, and unfortunately she was found.
Very similar to what happened with Kyle Plush in Ohio. You have different call takers, and them not putting 2 and 2 together, that it's the same call, that they're related, and that information not getting out there when it could have saved lives.
Wow, it's incredible. Guys, you all have done an incredible job of sharing all the information. We've covered so much in such a short amount of time. Is there any thoughts y'all want to push out there? Anything y'all want to wrap up with? Some closing thoughts?
Train, train, train.
Yeah.
Train a lot, bring your dispatcher cookies.
Yes. Include dispatch and training. I mean, they're truly a vital link there. I do wholeheartedly believe that dispatchers are one of the most underutilized resources that first responders have.
Correct. You're only as strong as your weakest link. And if you never train your dispatchers, then how can you expect them to perform if they don't understand what you're doing in your response to different types of incidents? And if you don't have any idea of what they're capable of or what the dispatch concept is, I mean, at the airport, we're running cameras, we're investigating things for the officers, we're right there, but there needs to be more training together that's integrated.
Yeah, absolutely. I cannot agree with y'all more. I've been fortunate to have a lot of great dispatchers and impact my life along the way. And my last assignment in the police department was working a short-term covert unit. And our dispatcher handled not only the regular dispatch duties, but he was also our research component. And he would do on-the-fly research. And I tell you, if you sneezed close to a computer, he could find you. And it was just great to have him care that much. But yeah, he became part of the family, and that was one of those things. Having that connection, having him actually in the office with us was a big deal. Cannot thank you all enough for being here and taking the time to share with us. Casey?
Hey, thanks everybody for watching and listening. Y'all do me a favor. Tell me if you like the title of this podcast, Dispatchers, the point guards of the call. And with that, visit us at alert.org. That's ALERRT.org. If you have a login, log in. If you don't create one, go to the top left of that home page. It says e-learning on there. You can click on the e-learning portal. You will get prompted over. All those TEKS courses that we've been talking about are on our own LMS. For questions, comments, concerns about the call and this podcast, you can email us at thecall@alert.org. And with that, we're out. Fade to black.
I thought you guys were nervous.